All right. Thank you for coming to another series in our Tuesday talk. Today we are talking to some alums. So I will go around and have them introduce themselves, and then we will talk about specifics of when they went to law school and where they are now and things like that. So why don't we start with Jason? Jason, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jason Harmon. I went to law school I graduated in 2015. I'm now working at Snell and Wilmer in Salt Lake City. I do mostly civil commercial litigation.
Perfect. Aqmar?
Hi, my name is Aqmar Rahman. I'm an international trade attorney based in Washington, D.C. My practice focuses on trade remedy law.
And Ray?
I'm Ray Nicholson. I graduated in 2008 from KU Law. Currently, for the last 7.5 years, I've been practicing in Johnson County, Kansas for the Kansas Department for Children and Families. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor. I practiced for a little while in Colorado and also in Kansas.
Where are all of you from originally? We can just go in the same order so we don't talk over each other.
So I'm originally from Utah. I grew up just south of Salt Lake City, and then I moved sort of blindly to Lawrence for law school. And then we were out there. I was at Shokardi Bacon for 4 years. So now I feel like I'm a native of Kansas. I really miss it, and it's weird to be back. But yeah, I'm from here.
So you were in Kansas for 7 years total then, Jason, for 3
Yep.
for law school and 4 after? Okay.
Yep, and I came back to Utah kicking and screaming, but I'm enjoying it now.
Same as Jason for me. I'm originally from Dhaka, Bangladesh. I moved to Lawrence and consider that my home. Moved there when I was 12, and now I live in DC.
And I'm from Kansas. I grew up in Overland Park, Kansas, and currently live in Prairie Village, Kansas. So I've mostly stayed in my bubble. I went to KU undergrad and then KU Law. After I graduated from KU Law, I did decide I was done with Kansas, and I went and I moved to Colorado, and I lived in Denver for about 1.5 years. And I missed home. I missed my family, so now I'm back.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Kansas and I'm still here, and I've never left the state for my zip code. So, okay. So what did you all do in law school? Like, what are some highlights of law school? If you could go back and tell someone, oh, I really enjoyed this experience. Yeah, we're getting in the hard hitting questions now. So what would you tell these students that are coming in to focus on or experience?
I think my most favorite experience and most rewarding was moot court, and I actually think it's the one that prepared me the most to practice law. I had by the time I got to the firm, I realized that everything I've been doing in moot court was exactly what I was doing on a day-to-day basis, writing briefs and thinking about arguments. And plus, I had a lot of fun. I got to know a lot of people through the moot court program and all the various competitions that I participated in. So. Though I don't think moot court is up there on the prestige sort of the same level as like a law review or something, which I also did law review, and I can't say I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed moot court. I really love moot court, and I really do think that it prepared me for, at least in what I do, civil litigation. It was very, very useful. And I actually see a difference in law students coming out of school that have done moot court and understand how to write a brief and argue with the court and all that. It's that would be my most helpful thing. I took a lot of great classes as well. But in terms of the activity that I did that I liked the most, that was most fun during law school and helped me the most, I would say moot court.
Did you go on to do counsel, or did you?
I did both.
Okay.
I competed twice in the National Native American Law Student Association competition. I did the in-house competition and then the national competition as well. So I did a lot of it and saw it from a lot of different angles. I'm actually helping Dean Warner, who is formerly at KU, do sort of revamp the program at the University of Utah now, because they're not nearly at the level of KU. So we're trying to help them get there.
Aqmar, you've had some time to think.
I'd say my most rewarding experience was the classes I took with the trade law classes, which is what I practice now with Professor Raj Bala, Professor John Head. They are phenomenal, world-renowned professors. I still speak with a lot of friends here who know about them, who revere them, really. So it was an awesome experience to be able to work with them.
I am so glad that they both went first, because it has been 12 years since I graduated from law school. So like 14 to 15 years since I actually was in it. And I had to do a little flashback. A lot of my practice has also been litigation as a prosecutor, and then also now I do a lot of litigation. So I agree with what Jason said. For me, it was some of those litigation activities. I also did moot court. I enjoyed that. The clinics have really gotten built up a ton since when I was there. When I was there, I think it's justice. It was the Defender Project when I was there. It's like the criminal justice, essentially, clinic. And I did that, and it was probably one of the only clinics at the time there. And now there's quite a bit more, but the stuff that gives you hands-on experience. And I was a 2L and did that. And I had actual clients in prison that I was going to visit. And then I was writing actual briefs that were going to go to the Court of Appeals. So the hands-on stuff definitely is what really has given you some experience, so that when you graduate, you feel like you're not completely in the dark.
And we've gone over this a little bit, but can you explain, I mean, when you say what your title is, I think that sometimes students don't know what that really means. So can you give us just a brief overview of what you kind of do day to day, what kind of cases you look at, things like that now?
Sure. So I'm an associate at a fairly large regional firm. We have offices in Utah, Nevada, California, Arizona, Idaho. And so when I civil litigation, mostly businesses suing each other, and we're representing one party or the other. When I was at Shook, Hardy & Bacon, I did primarily personal injury defense. So I always described that and it was mostly pharmaceuticals. So I always describe it as the commercials you see on TV where they're like, call 1-800-BAD-DRUG if you or a loved one have had this. I was always on the other side of that, defending the companies. I enjoyed that. It was great litigation because it was very big. It was complex litigation, so multi-district litigation and class actions and things like that, which I really enjoyed. As an associate at a large law firm can vary a lot, but for me, my day-to-day is every kind of motion or brief or whatever you could be asking the court to do in a civil case where people are primarily fighting about money, or it also includes, research and writing internally, trying to tell the team what we should do, writing and researching for clients. And their sophistication can vary, legal sophistication can vary. So it either, is a very sophisticated memo to an in-house lawyer who understands the law and what we're talking about, or it's to a business owner who needs me to explain what discovery is and what the motion we're going to be filing is going to mean and what the process is. So I do a fair amount of interacting with clients and telling them what the process is, what the next steps are. And then, appearing at hearings and arguing for our clients on various matters, whether it's discovery or dispositive motions, and prepping for trial. So sort of runs the gamut of things that you could be doing in litigation. And it starts all the way from when someone gets a mean letter from the other side, all the way up through trial and all the phases that people need lawyers at in civil litigation.
So I am an associate at a mid-sized firm in DC, and my practice is firmly rooted in trade remedy law. So my practice generally is for the U.S. Department of Commerce, Customs, the International Trade Commission, and the Court of International Trade. So a lot of my practice is working with foreign multinational companies responding to anti-dumping and countervailing duty questionnaires. That means traveling abroad to various parts of the world, which are not as cool as it sounds, because these factories are generally located in places where you don't want to go. But I do have some awesome experiences as well to be able to work with on these companies. So generally, an anti-dumping case is started at the agency level, and then it moves on to the court. So it's working with these companies from the first step to the end.
I'm a staff attorney for the Kansas Department for Children and Families. We are essentially the social service agency for the state of Kansas. So we distribute benefits, traditionally known as welfare benefits, but public assistance benefits. We also, and primarily what my work focuses around, is investigate child abuse and neglect. And when kids are removed from their homes for unsafe situation, they come into our custody. So we are also kind of the foster care agency. And then we also investigate adult abuse and neglect. So as the attorney, I am the attorney for Johnson County in Kansas. So we've broken out, we have kind of a handful of attorneys that represent throughout the state. It's a little bit of everything, and it varies day to day. There are about 200 employees that I work with that are all my clients in some way, shape, or form, and I'm the only attorney for that office. So a lot of what I handle is if somebody's found to have abused or neglected, they can file an administrative appeal, and we have a full administrative hearing where we call witnesses to try and determine if we have sufficient evidence. We get a lot of records requests, so I'm going into district court a lot for random subpoenas and records requests. And occasionally we get sued, so then we have to defend our client and assist them and walk them through. And then we also have, for some of those cases where the kids come into custody, I will go and appear on behalf of the agency in some of those child in need of care cases to represent the agency and whatever the issue might be. So truly with my practice, it's so varied. We like to joke as legal that we're the jack of all trades, master of none, but you truly are getting just all sorts of random things that come in day to day, that it's different, it changes every day, and you just kind of have to learn to go with the punches. And the good thing is that you find you're learning a lot of new types of law and a lot of new issues as random things come up.
So all of you have very different practices. How did KU's Career Services Office help you? I guess I didn't ask you before if they helped you. I'm assuming they did because I don't know them to not help anyone. But were there any substantive ways that you remember going through law school, either forums or lunches that they had or anything like that, on-campus interviews that helped you in your career path?
So yeah, KU Career Services really helped a lot. I think the way that I remember them being most helpful to me is I did not know how to draft a professional resume at all. And my experience when I came into law school was like waiting tables, and that was about it. That's how I put myself through college. So I didn't have a lot of professional experience. So I remember Leah being very helpful, and I just followed their advice to a T and asked, what it should look like, what I should and shouldn't put on a resume, how to deal with grades in undergrad that weren't great, and things like that. So that initial step was, I think, the most helpful because I was really flying blind in terms of entering a professional atmosphere at all. And then I did on-campus interviews. I did practice interviews with firms. I've since participated in those as the interviewers for practice interviews, and I think they're really helpful because, one, you can get some early exposure to firms that you may, you'll get younger people or associates that aren't necessarily hiring, from these places, but they will put in a good word if you make a good impression. But at the same time, they're just really honest, like, and tell you what their first impression of you was and why, and how you can fix those things. So I think if you go into all of it with a open mind in terms of recognizing that all these people know a lot more about the profession than you do, they can be really, really helpful, and they work for me.
I would say the same thing. The one thing I would add is also the Career Services Office helped me connect with the KU Law gang, or the KU Law alumni base that's all over the country. And they are so helpful. I don't think I reached out to anybody who would not speak to me, and everybody is willing to help and direct and provide advice. And that really, really helped me.
I would just say the same thing. I graduated in 2008, which was not a great time generally in the economy. And when I graduated, I knew that I was immediately going to go to Colorado without really any contacts. And so they helped me build up my resume before I went. And then I heavily utilized the alumni network, and they were able to get me in touch with folks in Colorado. If nothing more than to network. One thing I have very quickly learned now that I'm in the practice of law is I still bump into folks or work with folks that I went to law school with. So day one, when you're in law school, when you're at the orientation, those are the same folks that you're going to be dealing with in a courtroom in 10, 15 years, and they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember you from law school and whatever reputation that you developed early on. So I think it really did, just having not only career services, but just in general, having that alumni base through KU has really helped to shape my career, because you talk to most folks and either you know them for law school, or they ask you, you go to KU, what year you graduate, was Professor so-and-so still there? And so just that networking piece has been huge.
Yeah, and about the alumni connection, the faces that you see on the screen are not random. So we didn't send out a mass email. So Ray actually admitted myself and Aqmar for sure, maybe Jason. She was in my role back when we started. And Aqmar and Jason and I were all in the same class. So those connections that you build in law school will allow you to be able to reach out to people 2 weeks in advance of a Zoom meeting and ask them if they can hop on, and they're happy to do it. So build those connections when you go to law school. I know that right now it's difficult for everyone to meet each other because we're all meeting by Zoom, but build those connections when they become available. And then something that the alums don't probably know is that the Career Services Office, although they helped us with resumes and things like that, now they have mandatory workshops for 1Ls. So you will have to go and learn how to put together a cover letter and a resume. It's mandatory. They have one on professionalism, so how to conduct yourself in an interview and things like that, which I think they had little tiny sessions here and there for us, but these are now structured sessions for everyone to be able to learn everything that they need to know when you're about to go into those interviews and things like that. So yeah, new things in the KU law world, by the way, guys.
I think that's great. And I think the professionalism thing is really key. I mean, I know I kind of hinted at it, but I went straight from undergrad at KU, which is a large school, to law school at KU. So I was still, 22? And it's such a shift. And so I think really understanding that you're going from an undergrad program where maybe not everybody is there really with a professional mindset, that you're immediately going into something that, while you still have fun, you still get to go hang out with friends, there's definitely a different mindset, and it's more of a professional community. And again, just developing that reputation, because it's going to stick with you. So it's important to use that as a chance to start making those connections early.
So now I have some specific questions. So Aqmar, what advice do you have for someone wanting to move to DC with a law degree? And if you've ever talked to me about DC and you're interested about it, it is our biggest City alumni network outside of the Kansas, Missouri area. So Aqmar.
Yeah, that is the first thing I would say. I'd say connect with all the alumni that's here. When I was at 3L for my spring break, I came out here and I met with probably 10 alumni. And that meeting did not lead to anything. But a year down the road, the position that I have now that I love was through one of those meetings that I had. So it really is an important aspect to be able to meet with the people here. DC is a phenomenal legal marketplace. It's fairly recession proof because the government's here and the government generally does not shut down. So it's a phenomenal place to work, live, and I think tapping into the network that is here is a great way to be here and work here.
Jason, what advice do you have for someone who wants to practice out of state in a big firm?
Let's see. I mean, I think the obvious first answer is you want to utilize the alumni. And I think you'd be surprised at how many people are in these markets. So I'm in Salt Lake City. It's a pretty small market, and we have two pretty big law schools right here within 40 miles of each other. So it's pretty saturated in terms of lawyers, first of all, and then they all come from the same schools. And what I would say is use that to your advantage. I actually think that law firms, particularly big law firms, are looking for diversity, and that means a lot of things, and it means diversity of where people went to school, and what their practice experience is, and what their life experience is, because it really helps serve your clients better to have people that just are different from everyone else that's at the firm. And so my experience has actually been the big firms around here are looking for people that did not go to the University of Utah or BYU. So I think you can use that to your advantage by promoting that. And the other thing I would say is not to discount your KU law degree. I remember being like hyper focused on like school rankings and things when I was just particularly when I was trying to get into law school. But I just remember I could tell you like which schools were above others and all that, because I think you're really focused. That's your only gauge, I think, as a prospective student. But then once you get into the practice, I mean, it really just does not. I wouldn't focus on it. I would promote it. I would use your degree to your advantage and the things that you bring that are different than other schools, because particularly big law firms, and I probably the same thing in DC, they get very focused around the same schools and the same experiences. And honestly, people from a different market, from a different place and different educational background are a breath of fresh air a lot of times in these firms. So you should use that to your advantage.
I got so zoned in on your answer that I forgot that I was moderating. It's like, wow, okay. Ray, I know that you went to Colorado, but for someone that wants to stay in the area where you are now, in the Kansas City area, what advice do you have for someone that's looking to be in that Kansas City area and go to KU Law?
Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's really your reputation as an attorney and as, frankly, as a human starts the minute that you're at the first event, because people remember what you did in law school, and they remember how you behaved in law school. They remember how you treated your fellow classmates. I had great experiences. I think there's something to be said, and the reason I keep coming back to Kansas, I love the Midwest. I love the people that I went to law school with. I love the community I work in, but people remember that. So coming in and treating other people with respect, and also showing up, being prepared, presenting yourself in a professional way, even when you're in class. And I think that for me was, again, a mind shift, because in undergrad, I never felt like I had to present myself in a professional way when I'm sitting in an undergrad class. But I think the key when you're in law school is it really is professional setting and that community, and you're going to start making those connections early and sticking with those connections. And I also think fully taking advantage when you're in law school of local internships is huge, because a lot of times those internships are going to turn around and hire their interns, because if you do a good job as an intern, they know you, they trust you, you've built that reputation with them, and they're going to turn around and offer you a full-time position. So really focusing on getting your name out there, and that first internship can get you your first job, which is far and away the hardest part about getting a job as an attorney, is getting your first job, because you don't have the experience. Once you've been practicing for a little while, you can usually fall into a job, or you can turn around, and I always say if all else fails, I can go solo. So it's just starting those connections early and starting those internships early is, I think, really the key to success.
Well, does anyone have any questions for any of our alums? This is always the awkward part. No one wants to talk.
You should call on people like they do in law school.
They can experience that in August. I'm not going to start subjecting people to that now.
Yeah, don't do that.
Oh, we have a chat question. Did any of you specialize? I'm assuming, Savannah, you mean in law school, perhaps with a certificate. If so, what did you specialize in? In law school, did you take any specific classes when you were going through? Any of you?
I did the International Trade Certificate and the Business and Commercial Law Certificate programs. I don't know if we still have those programs, but those were super helpful to get my foot in the door. It's just a differentiator, and I mean, especially for the practice that I'm in right now, it was very helpful.
So I came into law school thinking I wanted to get an MBA at the same time. I actually had no intention of practicing law, and then I got into civil procedure and really, really loved what I will call the game of lawyering. So I focused, and then I got my first internship with Shokardi and Bacon in my first summer. And that sort of led me to focus really heavily on civil litigation because I just loved it. So I did the same thing. I don't think I got a certificate. I might have, I can't remember, but I heavily focused on classes that were specific to litigation. So jurisdiction and complex litigation and remedies and classes where I knew that would be useful to me. I mean, the thing I would say about that is don't narrow yourself before you've had an opportunity to experience law school. But then if you find something that you're really passionate about and you love, go out. There's lots of places to explore that. As Ray was mentioning earlier, I also did all like the clinic or the practice skills, the deposition skills, the expert depo skills classes, all of that, because I knew I was going to be doing it. So I found those really useful.
I'm still reeling from the fact that you said you loved civil procedure. It kind of threw me off for a minute, and I thought I misheard you. Certificates didn't exist when I went to law school. Those came out later, so I didn't have that option. I just, honestly, I was ill prepared walking into law school. I had no idea what I was getting into. My undergrad was in political science. I needed to do something else to really be able to get a career, and I had an undergrad class that had some sort of oral argument in it, and I kind of was like, well, I like to debate, and fell into this. So I really came into law school without any sort of notion other than I knew I wanted to do public service of some form. So I took a variety of classes. I did try to take some of those, the moot court, the litigation type experiences out of it, and then the clinic through the Defender Project. So at least I would have some basic skills, but I sort of bounced around.
Yeah. And I'm just going to insert myself in. So I did the Advocacy Certificate. So I know that there's a lot of questions about like what certificates do we have and things like that. And I think everyone will back me up on this. The cool thing about KU is that if you find something you're really interested in, and I say this every time, and I probably sound like a broken record, but if you find something you're interested in and you approach a faculty member about it, they will help you as much as they can to get you on the path that you want to be on. So certificates are great and they're helpful because if you want to do litigation, you can look at the advocacy classes and kind of follow that framework to pick up the classes that you will need that will be helpful to you when you do it. That being said, you're not required to get a certificate. It's not like everyone graduates with a JD, so it's not like, it's kind of like a major, but you're not required to have one like you are in undergrad. It's just a helpful way of going along, and you'll get an actual certificate when you graduate. I have no idea where mine is. I haven't met an alum that really like hangs it on their wall. But it's just a way to keep you on track through law school. Does that kind of sound right to everybody?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say, I think that's the one I did too, but I don't really remember. I just remember I took a lot of litigation classes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not really something that if you go to an employer, they're not going to be like, well, where's your advocacy certificate?
Right.
And you're going to be like, so it's not anything that you would ever, it's, if you pick one and you end up halfway through being like, oh, I don't want to do this path anymore, no one's going to fault you for not doing the certificate. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. And
Oh wait, there's one.
Oh, there is one. Sorry, Jaden. Okay. Okay. So for the bar, there are, and I guess maybe you guys could answer this for specifically your areas. I don't know how, I truly don't, I've never thought about how DC operates, but there is a uniform bar exam now that has the same 200 questions for the fill-in like A, B, C, D section. And that's one day of the 2-day exam. So the second day or the first day, depending on which state you're in, is essay. So you can usually sign up for the uniform bar exam to take it in the states that have it. Both Kansas and Missouri have the uniform bar exam now. But then the state that you're wanting to practice in will also usually have you take the essay portion for that state. I don't know how you guys got your licenses.
It's probably changed since I did it. When I did it, that was the setup. I did the multi-state, and then you could transfer the multi-state within, back then it was within so many, like a year and a half or so. So I took the Colorado bar both days. And then when that multi-state still transferred within the next year, I just did that single state portion for Missouri and for Kansas. I don't recommend taking that path. Most states have reciprocity. So if you can get licensed in one state and practice there long enough, then you can get reciprocity and you don't have to take another bar exam. I assume that that's still how it works, but don't take 3 bar exams if you can help it. Try and get reciprocity.
I am barred in the state of Texas, but I don't live in Texas. I just waived into DC. Reciprocity is a great thing, makes it easy. I would recommend taking the UBE, which I think transfers easier than most states. And I think it's fairly uniform now.
Mm-hmm. And Kansas and Missouri both have that, so.
Yeah, and the big thing that I would point out, just having just recently moved jurisdictions, I took the bar exam in Missouri and then just waived into Utah, is every jurisdiction is very different in terms of its requirements, its time, what parts of the exam it'll accept, what parts it won't. And so to the extent you have certain states in mind or you think you have a plan, just think that through early before you go taking 5 bar exams, because they're not fun. So, but they are every jurisdiction varies and can be very different, and it can make it a little bit difficult early in your career to bounce around a lot. Once you get about 5 years out, there's a lot more reciprocity. It's easier to go into other jurisdictions. But in that first year or two, if you think you're going to be moving from state to state, just be thoughtful about it.
Am I the only one that did it twice? Yep.
Yeah, I was
All
not
right.
doing it again.
So the reason why is I passed both times, to clarify, but I had to take it in Kansas first, and Kansas wasn't a UBE state yet.
Yeah.
My employer wanted me to practice in Kansas, so I had to take that one, and then 6 months later or a year later or what, I don't know, I blocked it out of my brain. But then I had to take Missouri. So
I don't know. Mine was back in the day. I just remember there was a day, I first did Colorado and it was 2 days. There was a day of multi-choice and then an essay day. And then a year later, I went to Kansas and just did a day of essays and the multiple choice part transferred. And then 6 months later, I went to Missouri and did a day of essays and the multiple choice part transferred. So I can practice in those 3 states now.
Yeah.
If I ever want to.
And it will change too, most likely, by the time you all are graduating. So, and it won't be like a surprise. Like, they are going to talk about the bar exam a bajillion times throughout your law school experience. You will not be surprised at what you need to do to take the bar exam, wherever you want to end up. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. And if you have any more questions, and I'm just going to put them on the spot, I'm sure that our alums would be willing to answer them. So if you have any more questions that you think of, or if you're watching this recording later and you have a question for a specific alum, you can email me and I can pass that on for you. So thanks everyone. Have a good day. It was good to see you all.
Yeah, good to see
I
you.
miss all of you.
Bye.